Good evening, everyone. Apologize for the technical difficulties we experienced, but we're back, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the first ever Athletics and Recreation virtual panel discussion supporting Queen's student athletes through the pandemic. COVID-19 has forced us to rethink all of our programs, and we're grateful to be a part of this year's virtual homecoming, United by Moments. It's a great way to bring alumni together from across the globe, learn from each other, and ensure that everyone is safe and healthy. My name is Rick Powers, and I'll be your moderator for the next hour. I'm an associate professor at the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto and a Queen's Rugby alumnus. And it's great to see some of the names coming up on the screen here. Great to see you, and thanks very much for joining us this evening. I'm delighted to moderate this panel, and let me just introduce you to our panelists. First is Christie Gray, originally from Vancouver, BC. Christie is currently in the fourth year of the Commerce program at Queen's, and is a forward for the Varsity soccer team. She is a first-team OUA All-Star and leads as the co-president of the Queen's Varsity Leadership Council on campus. The Varsity Leadership Council is a council comprised of approximately 60 student-athlete leaders with representation across all varsity clubs and teams. Next is Steve Snyder. After finishing a playing career at quarterback at St. Abex and setting school passing records, Steve signed a contract to play for the Anashbrook Tigers in the German Football League. Upon returning to Canada, Snyder joined the London Junior Mustangs, coaching special teams and running backs. The team went undefeated and won the league championships in 2012 and 2013. Steve then went on to serve as a special teams and recruiting coordinator at Windsor University. 2014 saw Coach Snyder accept the position of offensive coordinator with his alma mater, St. Abex. The X-Men won back-to-back conference championships in 2015 and 16. During his time in Nova Scotia, Steve also served as the head coach of the under-18 Team Nova Scotia, as well as offensive coordinator for the under-18 Team Canada, who defeated Team USA in Dallas, Texas, a U.S. national team that featured multiple future first-round NFL picks. In 2017, Snyder became the offensive coordinator of the Western Mustangs. The Mustangs went on to an undefeated season. He scored the most points in Yates Cup history, and most points in national semifinal history, and won the Vanier Cup National Championship for the first time since 1994. Snyder started as the head coach at Queen's in January of 2019. At the time, 33 years of age, and the youngest head coach in Canada. Also with us this evening is Dean Tripp. Dr. Tripp is a full professor in the departments of psychology, anesthesiology, and urology. He is also the current chair of the General Research Ethics Board and the High Performance Program Mental Training Coach for the Department of Athletics at Queen's. Dr. Tripp has published over 80 peer-reviewed publications and chapters, several therapy treatment manuals, and has developed one CME-accredited pain conference over the last 14 years running in Kingston. Dr. Tripp has been nationally and locally awarded for his excellence in teaching and research, and his primary health research area is focused on pain and psychosocial factors associated with self-regulation within various health populations, including athletes. Last but not least, Becky Haist. Becky is a registered psychotherapist and currently the high-performance mental health coach for the Gaels. After finishing her degree in Anesthesiology at Western University, she worked with the Bishop Gators in their sports medicine clinic, catering to athletes' physical and psychological needs in injury rehabilitation. Upon realizing the need for more mental health support in university athletics, she returned to complete her Master's of Clinical Mental Health Counseling Education and Training, working with the NCAA athletes. Becky enjoys traveling with teams on international humanitarian projects and has served at 4 FISU World Universiade Games as a passion to see people grow to their potential. Welcome, all the panelists. Before we get started, we want to acknowledge that Queen's is situated on the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee territory. We are grateful to be able to live, learn, and play on these lands. Let's get started. Christie, first question to you. As a student athlete in this most unusual year, what are you and your teammates doing and finding to the most challenging aspects so far this year?
I think right off the bat, not having training camp obviously puts things in a weird place. Usually early to the middle of August, we are integrating our rookies into our ways, whether that be culture, everyday training traditions and all that sort of routine was thrown off for obvious reasons. That being said, I think we've done a good job of making the best of it. I think it's challenging because we still have yet to be able to train all at once. We're currently in what's called phase 2, which means we can train in pods of 10 or less. So we're really looking forward next week. We're going to be entering phase 3, but I think it's been an unusual year. And I believe that the most challenging aspects is not being able to be with our team. Normally we would be ending our regular season in the next week or so, which is crazy to think. And the fact that we haven't even been able to be together as a group is obviously challenging, but we're staying together and we're looking forward to phase 3 next week.
Good. Well, thank you. Becky, in your role, you work very closely with the coaches, teams, and student athletes. From your perspective, what is the impact COVID-19 is having on sport, physical activity, and well-being, and its effects on social development?
I think the obvious impact is that an entire season of sport has been canceled, which to our staff and student athletes mean that one of the things they love the most is taken away for a period of time from them. And so it really has forced us, in the midst of the delay for competition, to start looking at training, physical health, and fitness in a whole new way. And our student athletes have really had to draw on that personal passion and some of those internal resources to really engage in their training and their physical fitness in different ways, knowing that it's still a huge part of who they are, even though it may not look the way it always has for them in their normal season. And then on the other side of it, there's been a lot of impact on their academics, and with all the classes being online, and maybe having less travel, less competition, and online classes, at first seems like there's a lot of time flexibility for them, but really that has created such a high need for time management skills, for that self-discipline, self-control, and that sort of self-activating motivation. And so we're seeing that impact our student athletes in many ways as well. In terms of social development, I think Christie mentioned it's hard to not be with your team. That's one of the greatest joys of being a part of sport and for our team athletes. But really, I think even though these extra challenges are being put on their plate at this age, they really are showing great resilience in managing through it and navigating all the adjustments. And really, I think our student athletes are also leading their peers by example, just in terms of, once again, having to make sacrifices as student athletes and maybe not getting to participate in all the same social aspects, but really trying to, follow public health guidelines and do all the things to keep themselves and their team safe.
Okay, thank you. Steve, Coach Snyder, you heard Christie mention they were going from stage 2 to stage 3. Where are you with the football program?
Yeah, well, first of all, great to be here. Homecoming at Queens is always a special time. And although it feels different, driving into Richardson Stadium this morning, we still saw a lot of young people in tricolor, which is great. And of course, they were distanced and masked up, but special nonetheless. So with regards to our programming, we're in phase 2 as well. Our athletics program is united in our movement towards returning to sports. So we're doing the same thing right now. We've got our young men on the field in groups of 10, and there's no football equipment. We're not wearing helmet and shoulder pads, and everything is distance. We're always 6 feet apart from each other, but it's been great. We've been able to get out and throw the ball around and work on a ton of movement skill and skill development, and just being back in person and out at the greatest university football station in the country. It's pretty special to be back and have that feeling.
Great, thank you. Dean, over to you. What is your perspective on the impact COVID-19 has had and is having on varsity student athletes?
Wow, that's a great question. First of all, to hear Coach Snyder talk just gets me excited. I wish we were in the stadium right now under the lights. It'd be amazing. So basically, when I think about varsity student athletes, and I think about the impacts, well, they're multiple. Of course, there's a mental health issue that we're worried about, and that's an issue that we're worried about, not university-wide, but nationwide, really. We're talking about the economic repercussions that come with this, the cancellation of games for athletes, all the social benefits, which we've been talking about as athletes, as people as well. I mean, this outbreak has closed gyms, it's closed pools, it's closed stadiums, it's closed classrooms. So many individuals, really are not able to actively participate in what they love to do, as Becky mentioned earlier. And I think this hampers not only our ability to be socially engaged, but also to be physically engaged outside of your home. And that's such a large component of the university experience and an athletic experience. So under those conditions, you could expect that it's going to create stress. You can expect that people, because they may be less physically active on average, that that's going to be an issue. Longer screen time might also be an issue. Becky talked about structure. Having less structure can also be a stress, initiator. So when we think about mental health issues in our athletes, those are the types of conversations we want to have. Make sure that we're listening and hearing their perspectives. I think it's really important to start there. But when we think about mental health, it's really been a top priority for the university and the Department of Athletics, and has been on the front line of everyone's concerns. So in terms of the mental health aspects, they're definitely there. But time management, uncertainty, those are another couple of words I can throw around. I just mentioned uncertainty quickly. When I think about COVID, and I talk about the patients' experiences that I have in my research groups and in the hospital, but also with the students that I meet, weekly through my Zoom classes and lectures and so on, and interactions. Uncertainty is one of those killers. It's kind of like, how do you battle through uncertainty? And one of the things that I've been doing in my work with the athletes is looking at two things called acceptance and commitment, really. And acceptance really is, we have to accept this terrible situation in some sense, for its reality. We can't fluff it off as like, something that's not impacting us. So there's an acceptance of where we are. And I think a lot of the athletes have done a fantastic job of managing that part. But then there's the commitment. The commitment is really to their craft. As Steve was saying, so much more movement, motion work, so much more mental work, visualization, and aspects where you have opportunities to increase your vertical jumps and different aspects of themselves physically, but also we're working mentally with the athletes to look at some of those other aspects that can help with uncertainty. So long-winded answer, I apologize, but when we think about, the varsity student athlete, we really think about them in a multiple sort of pains of existence, and we try to approach each one of them with them.
Okay, thank you. Becky, you spoke about resiliency. Dean also mentioned it. As a former rugby player, I think it'd be challenging, to stay committed and stay healthy and positive. Do you do specific exercises with the student athletes to help them?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is drawing on the skills that they already have from their sport and helping them realize that they actually have a lot of these strengths already, just that they've developed over time through countless hours of training. And as Dean said, commitment to something over a long period of time, and just realizing that when they look back in maybe their athletic career, they've seen growth, but it's happened in spurts and it's happened over a long period of time, and helping them really apply that same mindset to resiliency through this season, I think, is one of the tools, and one of the specific ways we look at it is, they're going to see growth in spurts here, they're going to see changes, but they're already equipped really to sustain themselves through something in a long-term grind, as it may seem. So once they sort of make that connection, I think they realize like, wow, this resiliency, I have it, and I just need to apply it, and I just need to keep encouraging myself and my teammates to apply it over time.
Christie, I know it's not going to replace full-time, the full-time game and full-time practices, but just getting out in short bursts, the way your team has that helped the team?
Yeah, I think any opportunity that we get to be together to train is an opportunity to get ahead. So, I'm super grateful that Queens has put the infrastructure in place to allow us to do that, because I have friends playing all over the country, all over the world, and who are not so fortunate, who don't have the opportunity to be with their teams, who have been sent home from their respective schools out of caution or for other reasons. So I think we have to use every opportunity that we have as a group, whether that be in a pod of 10 or whether that be with our entire team, as an opportunity to get ahead and get better.
Okay, thanks. Coach Snyder, how has the role of the coach changed as a result of the pandemic? What are you seeing, and how are you supporting your student athletes? You probably, I think, have maybe track and field might be larger, but you have one of the largest intercollegiate teams for sure.
Yeah. You know what? From a core values and principles, the job hasn't changed, but the systems and the process in which we have to deliver this now and execute this certainly has. We're still committed to the holistic development of our student athletes. And we talk about 3 levels of support and 3 dimensions of a relationship. Because if you're going to support them, I think you got to build a relationship. So for us, those 3 dimensions are football, their academics, and their life. And now we've just got to execute those a little bit differently. A lot of it's happened online, as we all know now. So that's been different. I mean, I would say the big things are I've never been more, aware of health, and I've never been more in tune with facilities and some of the measures we have to take to execute our programming as safely and as responsibly as possible. So those are the things that have really changed. But supporting our guys is everything, and we always do that. Now we just have to do it again online, remotely. We have to be so much more flexible. We've embraced flexibility. We've got to let our guys do what's best for them and their families. So some of our young men haven't reported back to Queens this fall, and we respect that and we support that, and we're going to continue to incorporate them into our program from afar. And we have to be very cautious. Okay. We have to respect what's going on right now in the world. And I think we've done a really great job of that. And to echo what Christie said, I couldn't be more proud of our university and our athletics program and the procedures and the plan we have, because we are so much further ahead than a lot of schools across the country. Our athletics return to sport programming is very well thought of. It's very thorough. It's cautious, conservative. And right now, I think it's being executed really well by all our sports teams. I know it certainly is by our staff and our players. I couldn't be more proud of our young men and how serious they're taking this and how cautious they are. And that's the big thing, is we've just got to, when in doubt, we keep them home and we play it safe. And one thing it's really done as well is it's really enhanced the communication with our team. We've always taken great pride in communicating with our players and having our players communicate with our staff about just about everything. But now it's even more so. We can really get through this thing and put together a great return to sport plan for the fall if we're doing a great job communicating. And again, I'm so proud of our young guys and how they're doing that. So to kind of finish up, I think my roles has changed a little bit with some of the little day-to-day things, being involved in equipment things now. We had a gentleman, Jeff Meller is our longtime equipment manager who handles all that stuff. But right now we're not fully staffed for the fall. So there's a lot of our support people who are in place typically are not back with us right now. So our full-time coaches and myself have taken those roles on. So that's different, wiping down footballs and things like that and getting equipment organized before practice. But it's fun, just to be out there and be with our team is amazing. And, again, I can't say how proud I am of our athletics program for the great plan we have in place right now.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Becky, can you weigh in on your perspective? How has your role or work changed as a result of the pandemic? What are you seeing in your specific field?
Yeah, I think the major change for me is that all my meetings or one-on-one meetings with student athletes have moved online, which can have its benefits and its drawbacks, but we have seen our student athletes respond well and be flexible, and sometimes find it easier to be meeting online. So that's probably the biggest change for me, but also what we're trying to do is a lot of preventative work, or finding ways to be creative and reach out to our student athletes and really sort of anticipate and try to be aware of their needs before they really become significant. And so we're looking at ways to, we're always encouraging our student athletes to reach out if they need help. But what we're trying to do a lot of this year is bridge that gap and kind of be reaching out to them as well. And so we have a few tools in place this year that we're going to be using. And also just trying to, work with teams and individuals. So one thing I think that I've been seeing in my field is just, the sort of range of places and emotions that athletes can be going through. And so they're carrying this disappointment of the season being lost while also still trying to be proactive and grow in their sport, while also maybe trying to maintain school. And so really it's like everybody's going through a collective experience, but each person is having their own individual way of going through it, and range of emotions and reactions, and that depends on their skills. So what we're seeing and trying to anticipate a lot of is just meeting students where they're at, which can be sort of a whole spectrum and range of places, but then finding what's the next step for them and how do they move forward in this wherever they are, and just making sure that nobody gets left behind, or nobody falls backwards sort of, or declines in their mental health through this year. That's a major goal for us, and why we're doing a lot of the preventative action.
Okay, thank you. Dean, over to you again. How has your role as a performance coach changed?
Yeah, as the mental training coach, it's, I see my tasks in a very similar way as they were to pre-COVID. I mean, I think for me, to help define in athletes that I work with their focus, the execution of goals, balance that competing stressors as they try to make themselves more elite, and keeping motivation high. I mean, those I think are the basic, kind of objectives that, I would say I would have as generally as a mental training coach. But I mean, really, the theme I see lately is uncertainty. And, and uncertainty really is this kind of mindset, or this aspect of mindset that can interfere with focus, interfere with goal setting and goal performance and acquisition. So I think that's something I find I'm doing more of with the athletes, and it's appropriate. I mean, we're in a space where training blocks are now adjusted and changed, and goals are different. So it's not really about prep on the season, or prep for a big race, or prep for the end of the year. It's more like, okay, we're finding and making goals, and establishing training blocks with goals inside of them for each athlete to push themselves. So, my goal now, I think, really is to keep athletes as competitively as I can, and sharp mentally as I can on those aspects. Because, come competition again, those are exactly the same mechanisms that, push an athlete from, maybe position 7 to that, 8 or 9 in terms of their eliteness score. So that's what we try to do, is keep those mechanisms, in mind as we move forward. So I'm very happy with how the athletes have responded, for sure.
Well, let's talk to one of them again. Christie, specifically, how do you feel, and what is Queen's doing to support student athletes through this COVID-19? And how are the supports helping you and your teammates?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of touched on it a bit before, but I think in sort of what Coach Snyder mentioned as well, the robust infrastructure that's been put in place that has allowed us to even be moving from phase 2 to phase 3 and not be sent home was clearly extremely well thought out. So I think right off the bat from last semester, there's been plans in place that have allowed us to not only return to the field, but also return to the ARC, which is incredible. Working with Colin and Evan, the entire strength and conditioning team deserves an award for coordinating all of our various pod groups, because instead of working with our team twice a week, they're now almost working with 6 times the amount of work for our team, right? There's 6 time slots instead of 2. So they should be commended, along with the additional ARC staff who have to sanitize the turf, sanitize our equipment, like Coach Smith said. Again, everyone's taking on responsibilities given the restrictions for certain coaching staffs, and everyone's sort of jumping in to help. I think it's a pretty unique time, and I think Queen's has provided us with the infrastructure to do it, which is incredible. So whether that be student athletes continuing with AFAs, that means the world to student athletes. Like for us, obviously, not having a season is devastating, but we still have school, right? And we still have to pay the bills for that. So that alleviates a lot of financial stress. And I know I can echo that for myself, much appreciated, as well as maintaining as many traditions as possible. So Brianna kicked us off with the beginning of the year speech. We got our welcome packages, so our long sleeve shirts, our water bottles, they're trying as best they can, whether it be Gaels 101. So helping to integrate the first years every Sunday night virtually. I think Queen's has done a fantastic job of doing everything they possibly can, given the challenges. And I think All I can say is thank you, because from a student athlete perspective, obviously not having a season, it's devastating. And we work our whole lives to be on a varsity team for say 4 or 5 years of your life. So to have that taken away is obviously extremely upsetting. But I think they have provided us the best possible scenario given the adversity that COVID's presented. So I think thank you.
Christie, I know you're in fourth year. You just had sort of your last athletic year taken away from you. You mentioned that fifth year. Do you think a lot of your colleagues are going to consider coming back for a fifth and final year?
Yeah, I think COVID has put a lot of things into perspective. And a lot of my teammates who maybe weren't considering to do 5 years are now strongly considering it. I think having your college career cut short, especially if you're not considering to go on and play pro or pursue other opportunities, I think that's pretty upsetting, right? To have last year be, I guess, you kind of backtrack and say, well, I guess that was my final year. Where was senior day? You're sort of left with a, I guess, unfinished book, as some of my teammates are saying. So I think that's encouraged a lot of people to consider staying the extra semester. So it'll be really interesting to see what the responses are like from other teams. But I've been hearing a similar sentiment from VLC. So.
Okay, good. Coach Snyder, you shared how your role has changed because of the pandemic. Anything to add in terms of how Queens is assisting your student athletes?
Yeah, again, just the staff taking on, new roles and everybody being so flexible and putting the time and effort in to adapt to the new environment. And I'm so glad Christie was able to mention our strength and conditioning staff, because the work they're doing right now to accommodate all the teams is incredible. And the big thing for us is, again, with what Christie said, it's the AFAs. Our student athletes have made a significant commitment, and I'm so glad that we were able to, as a university, honor our commitment to them financially, because, when that season was canceled, I think we were all really disappointed, but we didn't want to sit and pout for too long. It was time to stick together, come up with a plan, and decide how we were going to continue to push forward and to have the financial support stay in place for our student athletes so that they can continue to move forward with their plan, and maybe even look at the possibility of extending their university careers, was significant. And now we've got to make sure that we can continue that into 2021. And we're going to, as a football program, we're going to see, some adjustments, obviously, because, you look at things like the Gale Force Dinner, which is our major fundraising gala, which is an incredible event, 300 alumni and supporters and parents in Toronto supporting us for a night and raising a significant amount of money. I don't know if we're going to be able to get 300 people in a banquet hall anytime soon. So we've got to come up with a new initiative to continue to support our student athletes from a financial perspective. So AFAs is at the forefront for us. And I know that how engaged our alumni community is and how passionate they are. I know we're going to get through this together, and we're going to stick together, and it's going to be time for all of us to step up and do some great things to continue to push our athletics programs and our football program in particular into the future, because I'll tell you, I think the future is incredibly bright. Our football program is doing everything at a first class level, I truly believe, and we have great people in place, and it seems like everybody right now is bought in. We're out there on the field, and I couldn't even tell you how many days we are away from a real football game, but you wouldn't know watching our guys out there work. And that's a testament to their passion for the game, their commitment to our program, and the vision that we've put forward for them. They see, what's in the future, and they want to be a part of it. So, that's what I want to add. I love being here. I love what our guys are doing. It's so great to be back out at Richardson Stadium, and I feel for all the alumni that can't be out there with us today. But this is a great event, and I want to thank everybody for coming.
I'm going to get back to Dean and Becky in a moment, but I think a lot of our listeners may not understand, how student awards, athletic awards actually work in terms of financial awards. Becky, you mentioned one of the financial awards. I assume you're one of the recipients. How does it actually work? Is there a limit or to the number of awards per team, or an amount per student athlete? Sorry, Christie. That was to Christie. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I thought you were asking Becky. So from my understanding, there's an athletic financial award that's presented either initially when you commit to a school, and like Coach Snyder sort of mentioned, it's the school's commitment to you and your progress and throughout your years. There's also, from my understanding, another way about it. So upper year scholarships that can be determined. So those are granted based on a variety of things, including performance, school involvement, and obviously academic success is another huge thing that Queen's prides themselves on, which is another factor that influences your AFA. So Athletic Financial Assistance Award, from my understanding.
Okay, thank you. Coach Snyder, are they limited to a certain number per team?
Yeah, the metrics are interesting and they vary from sport to sport, but in the Ontario conference, the limit per athlete is $4,500. And that's kind of really what it's about there, is the $4,500 per athlete would be the max that you could offer. And then again, based on the sport, they've got some systems in place that put a cap on what you can hand out as a team. So I know at Queen's, we're very competitive with that cap, and we want to remain competitive with that cap so that we can continue to set the standard for the rest of the country. As Coach Hargraves once said, when you put on the tricolor, you set the standard for the rest of Canada. And I know our athletics program has done a great job leading the way in setting a lot of standards, whether it's with facilities or just commitment to student athletes, and certainly in the athletic financial award department as well. They've done a great job there. Good.
Dean, back to you. In terms of your research around with student athletes, how has that changed because of COVID-19? Do you have any special projects that you're working on that'll assist the athletes moving forward?
Absolutely. We launched 2 projects from my research lab here at Queen's. One started probably about April. Yeah, just around April. I was trying to get the exact date, but that doesn't matter. Around April. And we were really concerned about, the initial kind of experience of our athletes and sort of the psychological ramifications, but also to that loss model of, like my athletic identity is threatened. I'm not sure who I am now. So we've collected data on that, and our athletes were very good on that. And the story, and it's funny you should ask me this today. We were just looking at some of that data like 4 days ago. So the story tends to look like we have, what you would expect, that athletes were concerned about that. Those who were very high in athletic identity had the most psychological impact from it. In regards to just kind of being distressed or, feeling uncertain about their future. So that was an interesting sort of piece of data, and we helped use some of that in talking about how to manage our kids and how to work with, other kids in other universities. So that was actually fantastic, and our athletes were really responsive to that. We just launched another wave of another sort of COVID type study from my lab again, and our athletes are jumping on board with that again. And what we're seeing there is we're seeing that transition that we would expect to see. So reports coming back, early reports coming back now, and these were very early, but like I said, we were just looking at that the other day, a lot of our athletes are managing quite well. They have been very creative in regards to what they're doing, and they've felt, as we heard here tonight, very supported by the institution and the structure of how the institution's been so determined to make this right. So I think, so obviously there's some athletes who have had a real hard shake and have had much more difficulty, but overall our numbers tend to be looking, pretty much as you would expect in the middle of this distress. So that, having, again, this is just another great thing about being at Queen's, is our students are so engaged in this stuff, like even the student athletes, like if you ask them to participate in a research project, they're all for it. So I'm just impressed with, that spirit and that drive that we have here at Queen's. So so I'm seeing some of that in the research we're doing as well.
Good. Becky, you mentioned previously that some of the contacts that you're having with student athletes today has to be online through Zoom or through whatever other means. Has that changed things much? Can the support that you provide be just as effective doing it in an online format as opposed to in person?
Yeah, I think it can be just as effective. we just have to sort of explain a few extra things and set some standards in that context so that they still feel that they have the same level of confidentiality and safety, and that you're still trying to create a connection with them. But one of the big benefits actually of doing it online is that there's less limits to when and how we can meet with our student athletes. And so, if a few of them go home for their reading week break at the end of October, we can still meet with them, and we don't have to sort of lose that time and our momentum if we're working on a certain aspect of their growth, or looking at different seasons or during exam time. So we're actually getting probably more access with student athletes because of this online piece.
Okay. I just to our listeners, we'd like to encourage you to send any questions. We've got some, and I'll get to those in a few moments. But I also wanted to announce a new program being implemented this year, a partnership with the advancement team at Queen's, a partnership between the advancement team and athletics and recreation, and the Varsity Leadership Council, which Christie is involved with. They call it Gaels to Gaels. Student athletes identify what topics they would like to learn about, and the advancement team is organizing virtual sessions for them. We'll share the contact information at the end of the panel should you want to get involved. One of the questions that we've received, and certainly this is going on all campuses right now, is the whole discussions around diversity, inclusion, gender equity, etc. I guess, Christie, to you first. Have these issues come up in your discussions with your teammates, and do you see any progress being made or new initiatives being put in place to deal with these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. EDII, so equity, diversity, inclusion, and indigeneity, is a term that's being used widely across Queen's campus. I think it's pretty visible that I've seen I'm in the commerce program, there's visible efforts being made from my program as well as within athletics. So I'm one of the co-presidents of VLC, and over the summer we worked hard to get the new VLC EDII representative approved. So we actually just announced the new recipient of that position. His name's Julius. He's with the men's basketball team, entering his first year in commerce, and he's really, really passionate. And we have some really exciting initiatives coming up. So we're super excited to work with him. He's passionate, full of great ideas. And I think that's a perfect example of a step in the right direction that was led by students. And I think it's quite apparent, just comparing my experience of this semester versus any other Queen semester, there's visible changes being seen across campus, whether that be within athletics or within programs. So it's great to see. And I think there's a long way to go, but it's great to see that there's progress being made across the board.
Great. Coach Snyder, from your perspective and the football team, how are these issues being handled or dealt with?
Yeah, we're really attacking it. We're all about it. Our roster is certainly a diverse one, and it's continuing to grow that way in that direction. And we're glad to have diversity in our coaching staff as well. And for us, it's something that we want to take head on. So we've made efforts to reach out to our student athletes, but then really ultimately it was about getting everyone together and working together. So we held a virtual team meeting via Zoom, where we had a number of our veteran players speak about experiences and their thoughts on racism and how it's prevalent even in Canada here and sometimes at Queen's or in their communities and whatnot. And then we ended up getting into breakout rooms, and we had each breakout room had a topic, and we had a leader in that room to kind of help organize the guys. And they just spoke about things, and they took some notes, and they shared experiences and thoughts. And then we brought everybody back together and we kind of reported back, and it was a great discussion. And I'm so proud of our guys for, first of all, our leaders for taking the initiative to come up with this. This is something we really empowered our student athletes to take control of. We don't want this to just be about the coaches. We want it to be our players taking ownership of this stuff and moving it forward. And it's something we want to continue with. We don't want it to be a one-off. We want this to be all throughout the year, and we want it to be every year, because we want every single student athlete that comes to Queen's, and in particular with our football program, to feel really welcomed and to feel like they are a part of something very special and an absolute brotherhood. And the feedback that we received after the meeting and the next day from our student athletes was pretty significant for us. And there's an old saying, it goes something, they don't care until they know how much you care. And I think a lot of our guys realize that our coaches and our players and our program and our university does care. And I'm just really glad that we were able to take that on and do a good job with it. And now we just got to keep it going. And I know our guys are really excited about making a serious impact, not only at Queens, but in Kingston. And I think, there could be elementary schools and high schools and different organizations in Kingston that might be looking for guidance or for somebody to step in and help with these issues. And our football program is all about it. So we're available and we're willing to lead the way with regards to these types of activities. We certainly have a great coach in place to help with that. Our community engagement coach, Coach Kwame Osai, and some of our veteran players and even some of our young players, I think would do a great job bringing that into our community. So we're really looking forward to helping out in Kingston in any way we can.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Tripp, these issues are going across every campus, across society in general, right across Canada and across the world. But how have those issues impacted the research and the work that you're doing, particularly with student athletes?
Yeah, that's a great question. In regards to research, one of the hats I wear on campus, I'm the chair of the General Research and Ethics Board here at Queens. And, EDI issues have been long-standing issues that the Ethics Board has been working on. And I think it's just it's so prevalent right now in regards to the effort and the structural changes that have been made, like you suggest, across universities. And I think Queens is leading the way. I really do. I think that when we talk about how structure and policy have changed, it's tremendous in how some of those strides have been made and who's making those changes. Like we heard just a little while ago, these are often student-led initiatives. And Queens, before I came to Queens 20 years ago, my wife's a Gael, and I'm from the Maritimes, and she would always talk about Queens as having such a spirit, such a student active voice. And I can tell you, my 20 years here, I've seen that voice, and I'm seeing it again. So it's this kind of idea that although we're seeing structural changes at the academic levels, we're seeing it at research levels, we're seeing it in athletics. It really permeates the university. So I'm super proud of the work that people are doing and 100% behind that for sure.
Okay, good. Thank you. Becky, back to you. How are you suggesting that student athletes remain active and engaged during COVID? It's tough for everybody, but particularly for our student athletes. What are you suggesting they do?
Yeah, I think with the restrictions and some of the options being reduced for our student athletes, we're obviously placing an emphasis on making sure they don't become deactivated. So we don't want them to just be going to their training session and then always retreating back to their home and being sort of stuck in their bedroom for the rest of the 24 hours of a day. And so what we're really trying to do is make sure that they don't lose that motivation and that momentum outside of the sport context. And so, within public health guidelines, we're really encouraging them to get outdoors, to take study breaks, to go for walks, to make sure that they're booking sessions at the ARC gym, to be engaging sort of within their small circles of friends and teammates and housemates. And I think that the big thing is, as the colder months approach as well, the focus is going to be on how they can make their living spaces also a place where they can be doing home workouts and studying in sort of different locations. And even it's all about incorporating daily routines that are kind of meeting some of the basic needs that they wouldn't have had to think about before. But now you have to be intentional about like doing some stretching, getting up and taking stretching breaks, and getting some sunlight and some fresh air, and even just like cooking and eating with housemates to get some of those social aspects that maybe in the past would have just come naturally. And now they have to make some active choices for that. And so, yeah, we're just trying to help them recreate as much of a routine as possible that they can around campus and be planning activities. And so just really being forward thinking and setting goals and so that they can look back on this year and see, okay, I've had growth and there have been achievements, even if it has to be measured in a different way than it would have been during a competitive season. We want to make sure that they're planning and active so that they get to the end of this year and have had that forward momentum and are really feeling prepared to jump into things the year after.
And we all hope that we can jump into things the year after. There's no end in sight at this stage, but hopefully hopefully you're correct there. Christie, one of the things that I really enjoyed during my career at Queen's was the camaraderie that comes with playing on a team. Has that, how do you deal with that now when you can only have a certain number of your teammates out with you? Can you still get together socially and do things as a team?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously things are different, but I would say in terms of where we were at in the spring of this year compared to years past was way further. We started engaging with our team via Zoom. Our recruiting class was in our Zoom calls all the way through the summer, and we were almost already used to the pod mentality because we were put into mentorship groups and we worked really hard to integrate the new recruiting class into our team virtually. Some of the girls lived, I'm from Vancouver myself, so we tried to encourage people to meet up, obviously distancing and abiding by all rules and regulations. But we have done a good job of sticking with the pod mentality. And I think obviously we cannot train together as a team, and that's tough, but there's certain things you're able to do. So getting creative, right? Going outside, you can go on walks and social distance. I think you just have to get creative and innovative, and there's sort of no limit for that. Obviously, you can't be indoors with your whole team, but there's definitely ways around it. And getting to know positional groups, partnering people, working with smaller groups, having conversations you maybe wouldn't normally have, spending more time with people that you wouldn't maybe normally spend, integrating, I think, upper years with the younger years in our smaller pod groups has helped develop stronger bonds than in years past. So there's definitely been some benefits to the smaller pod mentality.
Okay. Coach Snyder, when you take a look at what's been, what's happening at your practices and with your teams, is there any move to try to get the players to perhaps try things that they haven't done before, because they didn't have the time, or is it really a more of a focus on maybe academics than before, or is it pretty much the same business as usual?
Yeah, it's definitely more of a flexible environment, but the big thing we want them to do is find structure. I can tell you, I think student athletes love structure. I know football players do. That's kind of what their world revolves around. So what we've done is we've had everybody, submit their class schedules, and we have their workout schedules and their practice schedules. And then we've tried to create a weekly schedule for them. And we want them to be as diligent with it as they can be and include new things into it. Absolutely get out and do things in the community. Just be smart about it. We trust them to be very respectful and very responsible. That's really what our program revolves around. It's our number one goal, is to be the most respected and responsible team. But we want those guys to enjoy, just like Christie said, whether it's going for a walk, there's so many little things that they can do as long as they're smart about what they do. But we certainly want them to take this time to learn new things, watch a lot of football. They don't typically have a lot of time to do that. So hopefully they're all at home tonight watching football and spending time together with their roommates and whatnot. And but academics is a big thing. It's actually much different, obviously, not going into class and not having that same schedule. But I think there's some benefits to it too. We always try to look at the positives, and I think it's a nice transition for some of our first year guys at times to have a different style of schedule and maybe some less pressure in some ways. So, but the big thing is, look, let's find structure. Let's get a routine. That's the big thing. And don't be afraid to try some new things and really commit to academically getting settled in. And for some of our guys, maybe taking advantage of online courses and excelling at a level that they maybe hadn't before. And that's what we want them to do. We certainly don't want them to feel sorry for themselves because of the environment they're in. We want them to take full advantage of it and turn it into a positive.
I thought you would have made it mandatory to watch you on this panel this evening.
I wouldn't put them through that kind of torture. They get enough of me already.
Dr. Tripp, we've talked about the student athletes. Let's look over at the coaches. Do you deal with the coaches as well, and how do they manage their physical and mental health during this time?
Well, yeah, I'm lucky enough to be considered inside that core, and I do talk with coaches on a variety of issues. And I think when you're inside that core group at Queen's as well, something that's really special about this group of coaches is they really do communicate well with each other. Like I've been around other groups